US. At the Brics summit in Brazil, Prime Minister Modi launched a scathing attack on Pakistan for supporting terrorism and thanked nations that stood with India in condemning the terror attack in Jammu and Kashmir's Pahalgam. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel is set to meet with President Trump of the United States today as the tension has turned from Iran to a ceasefire for Gaza. The much-anticipated India-US interim trade deal may miss its July 9th deadline, with talks hitting a rough patch over key unresolved issues, our sources have indicated. The United States is close to finalizing several trade agreements with its trading partners in the coming days, and they would inform other countries of higher tariff rates by the 9th of July, while the higher tariff rates are scheduled to take effect on the 1st of August. And Chinese officials plan to offer annual cash payments to incentivize couples to have children. This as China's population has been shrinking for years. Well, while addressing the 17th Brics summit in Rio, Prime Minister Modi strongly advocated for comprehensive reforms in global governance structures, emphasizing the need to better represent the global South in 21st century decision-making. The Prime Minister further highlighted the persistent marginalization and said that the global South remains a victim of double standards in international dealings, calling out the lack of fairness in global systems governing development and security. Significantly, you must note that the Brics leaders condemned the Pahalgam attack, and Prime Minister Modi said the attack was a blow to entire humanity. Notably, the Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin did not attend the summit in person. We, in fact, have Vishnu Shom with us to take us through the key takeaways. Vishnu, we've witnessed the Prime Minister emphasizing better representation for the global South. He's also asserted that there should be no hesitation in imposing sanctions against terrorists.
I think the Prime Minister's remarks at the Brics summit in Rio, Brazil were some of the strongest that he's made in the post-Pahalgam context. For me, that was a real takeaway, followed, of course, by the mention of Pahalgam explicitly in the Brics declaration itself. But in terms of the Prime Minister's remarks, he said that Pahalgam was an attack on the sole identity and dignity of India, and at the same time was an attack, was a blow on humanity itself, stressing to assert that this just wasn't an India issue, it was something which impacted countries around the world. He thanked nations that stood with India and made the critical point that victims and supporters of terrorism are not the same. He said that silent support of terror is unacceptable, India making it clear to the international community over here, and Brics, of course, is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, that they needed to be firm in condemning terror. Ultimately, of course, India would have liked Pakistan to have been named, but Pakistan wasn't named, but the Pahalgam terror attack was categorically mentioned. He said that there should be no difference between words and actions on terror. So these were some of the strongest remarks. And in terms of the Brics declaration itself, it says, we condemn in the strongest terms the terrorist attack in Jammu and Kashmir, during which 26 people were killed and many more injured. We reaffirm our commitment to combating terrorism in all its forms and manifestations, including the cross-border movement of terrorists, terrorism financing, and safe havens. That certainly does, to a large extent, address what India's concerns are.
Yes.
But I think the very direct message from the Prime Minister to countries around the world that they needed to be even more direct in condemning terror out of Pakistan, a known hub for international error, would be my big takeaway.
Vishnu, as always, thank you so much for joining us with the details on the big takeaway. The Brics declaration, as my colleague Vishnu Shom is highlighting, has condemned in the strongest terms the Pahalgam terror attack, but as with similar documents adopted at the other fora, did not name Pakistan as the perpetrator. But this weekend's Brics summit in Brazil, it's put a spotlight also on the growing internal divisions within the bloc of developing nations. This is something analysts have highlighted. About half of the group's leaders, including China's Xi Jinping and Russia's Vladimir Putin, didn't attend this gathering. Now, while BRICS has expanded from 5 members, which were originally Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, to 11 in the last 2 years, the additions, many experts have asserted, have brought fresh points of contention and perhaps diluted its clout. Delegates did avoid any controversial subjects that might trigger Washington's ire, analysts said, and this joint declaration condemned tariffs, refrained from naming US President Donald Trump, and mentioned Ukraine, meanwhile, only once. RT's Anastasia Volodina has more for us regarding what happened behind the scenes.
It's only day 1 of the 17th BRICS summit, and the final joint declaration has been released. And of course, in light of the recent escalation between Iran and Israel, the final declaration condemns Israel's attacks on Iran and calls them a violation of international law. Of course, this is not the only conflict in the Middle East. Israel's war against Hamas has also been touched upon, with joint declarations stating that BRICS condemns Israeli attacks on Gaza and called for an immediate ceasefire and full humanitarian access. Plus, the declaration states that Gaza is an inseparable part of the Palestinian territory, reaffirming the Palestinian people have the right for self-determination. BRICS also strongly condemns all terrorism, including the terrorist attacks in India's Jammu and Kashmir earlier in April of this year, and urges justice for those responsible without linking terrorism to any religion group. BRICS also welcomes the Lebanon ceasefire and calls for sovereignty of Lebanon and Syria, and of course urges Israel to withdraw its forces from the Syrian territory without delay. Big statements have also been made today during the BRICS plenary session on peace and security. Indian Prime Minister is of course in attendance and gave his words during the plenary session. And Modi criticized the global institutions like the UN Security Council, stating that it lacked representation from the global south. And he also highlighted the need for a multipolar world order and reaffirmed India's commitment to contributing to BRICS and global peace efforts. So, of course, a lot of big statements from BRICS leaders and top officials and the ones in the final declaration. And it's only been day 1. Big statements have been made, and we'll keep you updated as the BRICS summit unfolds.
Well, speaking of tariffs, Asia-Pacific markets traded mixed on Monday after US President Donald Trump confirmed that reciprocal tariffs, which were first announced in April, will take effect on the 1st of August. This is for countries that haven't struck a deal yet. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that tariffs introduced in April will be enforced starting the 1st of August for countries that haven't finalized an agreement with the Trump administration. Now, while the US Treasury Secretary dismissed the notion that the 1st of August represents a fresh deadline, he acknowledged that the new date could allow trading partners additional time to renegotiate tariff terms. Just listen in to what the US President as well as the US Treasury Secretary had to say.
Sending letters out on Monday having to do with the trade deals. Could be 12, maybe 15. You know, Secretary of Commerce right here. And I guess, Howard, I would say it could be maybe as many as 15 or so. And they'll be going out on Monday, and some will go out on Tuesday and Wednesday, and and we've made deals also. So we're going to have a combination of letters, and some deals have been made.
I don't think it's a bit of a pause, because I think what's happened is there's a lot of congestion going into the home stretch. And as part of the trade team, what's great about having President Trump on side is he's created maximum leverage. So by telling our trading partners that they could boomerang back to the April 2nd date, I think it's really going to move things along the next couple of days and weeks. The leverage here is with the United States. We are the deficit country, the surplus country. The EU has a gigantic trading surplus with us. We have the leverage because their economy is much more export dependent than the US. In general, the US is a very large closed service economy that our imports are quite low. We're a big economy, which makes the deficit numbers big.
Meanwhile, the much anticipated India-US interim trade deal may miss its July 9th deadline, with talks hitting a rough patch over key unresolved issues. Our sources have indicated that no formal rounds of negotiations are scheduled, and a deal will materialize only if the two sides are able to bridge critical gaps informally in the next few days. Now, while both countries have been pushing for a limited mini deal focused on goods trade and tariff reductions, discussions have stalled over agriculture and dairy access, where India is unwilling to yield ground. India has made it very clear that sensitive sectors like dairy and certain agri products are completely off the table. This is what a senior official has informed NDTV. Rishabh Bhatnagar has been tracking this deal, the talks, the negotiations very closely. He joins us live at the moment. Rishabh, you've been reporting that India is playing hardball over dairy, agriculture. But as far as this interim deal is concerned, is it likely to miss its July 9th deadline?
Right now, as things stand, Parmeshwar, we have two scenarios that are brewing. Scenario one is, of course, that India reaches an interim trade deal. It will be a smaller trade deal that will be based on tariff reductions on certain goods, as well as India getting the reciprocal tariff exemption of the 26%. That is scenario one. Scenario two is that if a deal is not reached by July 9th, in the next 48 hours, that is, there will be a period between July 9 and August 1st, between when these tariffs will go back up to April levels. And that will also provide some sort of a comfort or some sort of a time period where India can go ahead and then continue negotiating. But as things stand, what we're seeing is that, like you said, no more rounds of negotiation are pending. The Indian team returned to new of negotiation between these 2 days that we're seeing. What we're also seeing is that, like you said, agri and dairy, both of them remain massive sticking points. India is unlikely to budge on those in a very, very meaningful manner. Of course, India is unlikely to budge on those. What we're also seeing is that India has repeatedly said that a deal will only be made if we get sustained preference in labor-intensive sectors. Now, what that means is that India wants relative competitiveness versus other manufacturing economies like Thailand, like Vietnam, Bangladesh. India wants preference against all of these other manufacturing hubs that also serve as a major sort of transshipping venue for Chinese goods. So India wants preference in these grounds as well. So that is what we have our eyes on. We will keep our eyes peeled on this for the next 48 hours as well.
Of course, we'll keep a close eye on the key developments with you, Rishabh. Thanks so much, as always, for joining us with the latest. Meanwhile, let's take you through the quick update from Texas coming in regarding the flash floods in the state of Texas. Well, the current situation, at least 79 people have died. This flood has left many more missing. 4 months worth of rain, believe it or not, 1.8 trillion gallons fell in just hours on Friday. Authorities are unsure how many people remain unaccounted for in this US state, but they include 10 children. And the tragedy has brought scrutiny on the National Weather Service in the US as well, because the agency's Central Texas offices have several critical vacancies, and while some openings may predate the current administration, that number has roughly doubled since Donald Trump returned to office, as per reports. This means there are fewer people able to coordinate with local authorities, possibly hampering the emergency response, as experts have said. Here's a ground report from Texas. Listen in.
I'm standing on the banks of the Guadalupe River in Hunt, Texas, the site of some of the worst damage to come from the floods that ripped through this area on July 4th. Behind me is Camp Mystic, a girls' camp that was devastated by a wall of water that came raging through here in the middle of the night. Dozens of young girls were swept away, many who are among the approaching 70 who have been killed in this, 21 confirmed children who have died. Out here today, what we see are families returning to this spot to look through the camp, look through the dorms, look through the cabins where their children were. They're walking through and examining piles of debris, from soaked mattresses to personal trunks. They're opening them and looking through for any kind of personal belongings that they can find. The waters are calm now, but just about a couple hundred yards away from where those families are, search and rescue efforts continue as DPS troopers continue to look through on the riverbank and under collapsed trees and uprooted trees to see what they still might find. Also today we've seen other families come out to help in that rescue or search effort. walking riverbanks, doing whatever they can to try to help those families who are still searching for answers of maybe where their children are. One of the things that you can see out here is just how high the raging waters got. There's debris dozens of feet up in the air and the trees that are somehow still standing. You can see huge trees that have been ripped up by the roots. Others are still here, but the debris pile, the water just carried it extraordinarily high. There's no way to reach it. It just gives you a real sense of the impact and the power of the water that just rammed through this area in the middle of the night in a pitch black storm.
Search and rescue operations continue with a full response from local, state, and national first responders. At present, there's over 400 first responders for more than 20 agencies that are working in Kerr County. We have more than a dozen canine working in and near the river. More than 100 air, water, and ground vehicles are in the field right now working on this search and rescue. As of 9 a.m. this morning, we've recorded 59 deceased in Kerr County. Among those who are deceased, we have 38 adults and 21 children.
Well, let's switch tracks now. The latest round of indirect ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas have ended without a breakthrough. In fact, the latest round of indirect negotiations come as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu heads to Washington to meet Donald Trump. Netanyahu says he thinks his meeting with the US President, which is scheduled for Monday as in today, should help progress efforts to reach a deal for the release of more hostages and also a ceasefire in Gaza. He actually said he had given his negotiators clear instruction to achieve a ceasefire agreement under conditions Israel has accepted. Here's what the US President had to say.
But we're working on a lot of things with Israel, and one of the things is probably a permanent deal with Iran. In other words, they have to give up all of the things that you know so well. The attack turned out, according to every single Atomic Energy Commission, that was a complete and total obliteration.
For an expert's view on the matter, joining us currently, Daniel Block. Daniel, always a pleasure to have you on our show. How crucial would you say this upcoming Netanyahu-Trump meeting in Washington is?
I think it's going to be very important, both to Netanyahu and to Trump. And one of them is going to wind up being disappointed because the two of them, I think, in many ways have oppositional goals, even though they don't see it that way. Netanyahu wants to stay in power. I think that's one of his primary goals. This is for a domestic audience in many ways. He wants to make sure that he can win the next election, which is not going to be all that far away. And he wants to keep his coalition together so he can postpone the election for as long as possible. And if he gives in to all of Trump's requirements and demands, which is a ceasefire and a permanent ceasefire in Gaza as soon as possible, that could cause some domestic political problems for him. Trump, on the other hand, wants the same thing in some ways he said he wanted from the beginning, which is an end to the war in Gaza. He wants it to be done permanently, not just a temporary ceasefire. And so he's going to try and press Netanyahu to agree to that. And we're going to see what happens.
Indeed. Also, Daniel, as we wrap, how credible would you say this current ceasefire push is? Are we really witnessing real diplomatic momentum?
I'm going to be hesitant to say we're witnessing real diplomatic momentum to end the war in Gaza until I see the war in Gaza actually end. Because the truth is we've been down this road before, as I'm sure you know. We've had ceasefire deals that had pathways to becoming permanent ceasefire deals, and they've collapsed.
Yes.
The war has started again. Israel has resumed bombing Gaza. And a lot of this, again, has to do with the domestic political dynamics within Israel itself. Now, there's, I think, a sense in Washington that maybe this time is a little bit more serious than it was before, that Trump is more determined to get a permanent ceasefire. And you do see within Israel a desire to end the war among the domestic population. There has gone up, I think, to a pretty significant extent from early on. And so there's more of a chance now than there was before to have an actual ceasefire that stops the fighting. But again, until it's actually said and done,
Indeed.
I'm not going to trust it.
Daniel, always a pleasure to hear your views. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll keep in touch with you for regular updates. Slipping into a very quick commercial break. Back in a moment with the latest for you. Do stay tuned. Welcome back. The United Arab Emirates has made its residency program more accessible to professionals across sectors. The Gulf nation has introduced a new type of golden visa based on nomination, with some conditions unlike the current practice of investing large amounts in either property or business in the country. So this move comes as good news for Indian nationals who make up one of the largest expat communities in the UAE. You must note that India and Bangladesh have been selected for the first phase of testing this visa. Disha Bagchi has more for us.
In a boost for Indians seeking to move to the UAE has introduced a new golden visa, which essentially will allow Indians to get lifetime residency in the country for just rupees 23 lakh. Now, previously, this visa would require Indians to invest in the country, but that is no longer a criteria, where now applicants can simply nominate themselves with this one-time fee of rupees 23 lakh. And after these applicants are vetted for their criminal record, social media behavior, anti-money laundering compliance and other such requirements, if they meet these requirements, you can get this golden visa, which essentially will allow visa holders to bring their family, hire domestic help in the country, and even run businesses in the UAE. So this is a major boost for Indian immigrants. And the company running this, leading this visa process, which is the Riyadh Group, has said that they anticipate 5,000 applicants in just the first 3 months. So quite a big demand for this visa. And India and Bangladesh are getting early access and priority access to this visa in the first phase. And in fact, what this means is this is part of essentially the India-UAE the bilateral partnership agreement that was signed in 2022. And it's really a boost for Indian immigrants seeking to move to the UAE, because this essentially means that the Indians don't have to invest in the country, which was a bit of a hurdle for those seeking to move to the UAE. But now, with just a one-time fee of rupees 23 lakh, you can get lifetime residency in the UAE.
And meanwhile, the Badshahs of Birmingham, or Team India, have pulled off a sensational victory, defeating England to level the series 1-1 and ending a 68-year-long wait for a win at Edgbaston. Leading from the front was captain Shubman Gill, rewriting the record books in style. Just take a look at the highlights.
Akashdeep Singh picked up where he left off on day 4. Ollie Pope's stumps knocked off, just what the doctors ordered. Then followed Harry Brook, the ball staying low and doing all the tricks. Akashdeep unrelentless. Captain Ben Stokes, along with the centurion from the first inning, Jamie Smith, tried to counter-punch. But Washington Sundar wasn't going to let the baseball take over. A slider on the stumps and Ben Stokes goes back to the pavilion.
Now it's up to Ben Stokes to have a word.
Jamie Smith tried to replicate Rishabh Pant, but wickets kept falling at the other end. Akashdeep finally picked up his maiden fifer to send back Smith and end all hopes of an England fight back. A poetic end to the match as Akashdeep picked up the final wicket, his first ever 10-wicket haul in Test, that earned India their first ever win at Edgbaston.
For a Test match to remember for Shubman Gill and India.
Well, meanwhile, switching tracks, US President Donald Trump has dismissed Elon Musk's newly launched political party, the America Party. For Elon Musk, well, space, done. Electric cars, done. Buying Twitter, done. But starting a political party in the United States, well, not so fast it seems. The billionaire tech titan says he's done waiting for Washington to fix itself. And now, after a very public falling out with the US President Donald Trump, Musk has announced the launch of the America Party, saying Americans are fed up with what he calls a one-party system dressed up as democracy. Bold move, right? Absolutely. But is it as easy as it sounds? Not even close. To go from tweet to ballot, Musk will need to jump through 50 different sets of state laws, gather millions of signatures, and also navigate a maze of legal challenges, many likely funded by the same Republicans and Democrats he wants to disrupt. Let's just take California, for example. Just to be recognized, Elon Musk's party would need either 75,000 registered members or over 1 million signatures. And that's just one state in the US. Multiply that, add federal election rules, lawsuits, and deadlines, and you've got a mission far harder than launching a Falcon 9. Don't get me wrong, Musk has the money. His net worth sits above $350 billion, but building a new political party in the US isn't just expensive, it's time-consuming, and experts say it'll take years and definitely won't be ready in time for the 2026 midterms. Musk, by the way, knows this. That's why he says his party will start small, targeting a handful of congressional seats to tip the scales on key legislation. And maybe a presidential candidate later. But even then, America's two-party system is a fortress, and third parties, well, they've historically bounced off the walls. So is Musk's plan visionary or vanity, revolutionary, or just reactive to losing his EV tax breaks under Trump's new bill? Well, for now, the America Party exists mostly on social media. But if Musk is serious, he's going to need more than memes, polls, and posts. He'll need paperwork, patience, and of course, a political army. And the news continues here on NDTV. We're slipping into a very quick break, but for the latest updates and breaking news, don't forget to subscribe to the NDTV and NDTV World YouTube channel.
As of 5:30, we have recovered 43 deceased individuals in Kirk County. Among these who are deceased, we have 28 adults and 15 children. 12 adults pending identification and 5 children are pending identification at this time.
What do you say to the parents that are in grief, understandably frustrated, as to how in the world this could happen? How in the world you could have so many campers in the way of this danger and not taken out of there ahead of this war?
Yeah, you know, that's the question of the hour. But, you know, with these, this is, last time it was this bad, and this one is even worse than that, was 1987.
This is NDTV, and you're watching NDTV 24/7.
Hello and welcome. You're watching The Breakfast Show. I'm Gargi Rao. Stay with us for all the news you need to start your day with. Let's take a look at the headlines we're tracking at this hour. Prime Minister Modi condemns terrorism at Brics. He calls for zero tolerance towards terrorism as a principled stand, not a convenience, he says. Brics' statement condemns the Pahalgam terror attack. India win the historic Birmingham Test to end the nearly 58-year-long jinx, levelling the 5-match Test series against England.
Right through with bat, ball and in the field. Considerable improvement.
Captain Shubman Gill smashes records at Birmingham, becomes the youngest Indian captain to win an overseas test and only the second Indian to hit a ton and a double ton in the same test match. Monsoon mayhem in Himachal Pradesh. The cumulative death toll in the state in the ongoing monsoon season is now 78, while 37 remain missing. As opposition parties challenge the Election Commission revision of electoral rolls in Bihar in the Supreme Court, claiming lakhs will lose the right to vote, the Election Commission has clarified that there's been no change in rules for the electoral rolls process. And no India-US trade deal yet as the deadline nears. Agriculture and dairy remain sticking points. President Trump says tariff letters have been prepared and some more deals will be announced by the 9th July deadline. Our top story now, and Prime Minister Modi delivered a powerful and focused address at the 17th Brics Summit in Brazil, emphasizing urgent reforms in global governance and a united stand against terrorism. The Prime Minister called for a new multipolar world order, one that is inclusive and prioritizes the interests of the global South. And turning to peace and security, the Prime Minister condemned terrorism as humanity's greatest threat. Referencing the recent attack in Pahalgam, he called for zero tolerance towards terrorism, emphasizing that condemning terrorism must be a principled stand and not a convenience. He warned against giving